7 years. Our entire marriage was built on a lie I didn't even know existed. Update 5. Final resolution. Posted to r/true off my chest. I'm sitting in my lawyer's office, and there are 2 pieces of paper on the mahogany desk between us. 2 DNA test results. 2 documents that have completely dismantled the life I thought I had. The first one proves that my son is 99.99% my husband's biological child. The son he accused me of conceiving with another man. The son he looked at with suspicion for months, treating him like evidence of a crime I never committed. The second one proves that my husband has a 6-year-old daughter with his coworker. A daughter he's been hiding for the entirety of our marriage. A child conceived while he was telling me he loved me, while we were planning our wedding, while I was walking down the aisle toward him believing I'd found my person. My lawyer is saying something about asset division and custody arrangements, but I can barely hear her over the sound of my own heartbeat. I keep staring at those papers, watching my marriage crumble into neat columns of genetic percentages and legal terminology. 7 years. Our entire marriage was built on a lie I didn't even know existed. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me go back to where this all started, or rather, where it started to end. 3 months earlier. The accusation came on a Tuesday evening. I remember because I'd had a particularly long day at the clinic, 3 back-to-back patients recovering from spinal surgeries, and my shoulders ached from the physical work of helping them through their exercises. I was looking forward to a quiet dinner, maybe a glass of wine, watching our son play with his blocks before bedtime. Instead, I walked into a cold house. My husband was sitting at the kitchen table, and I knew immediately that something was wrong. He had that look on his face, the one where his jaw is set and his eyes are flat, like he's already made up his mind about something and is just waiting to deliver the verdict. "We need to talk," he said. I set down my bag, my stomach already tightening. "Okay. What's going on?" He didn't answer right away. Just stared at me with this expression I couldn't quite read. Then he said it. "I want a paternity test. For our son." I actually laughed. I thought he was joking. Some kind of dark humor I wasn't picking up on. "What? What are you talking about? Our son doesn't look like me." His voice was cold, clinical. Like he'd rehearsed this. "He has your coloring, your features. Nothing of mine. I've been thinking about it for a while now, and I need to know." The laughter died in my throat. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline, waiting for him to say he was kidding, that this was some kind of test I didn't understand. But his face didn't change. "You think I cheated on you," I said slowly, the words foreign in my mouth. "You think our son isn't yours. I'm not accusing you of anything. I just want the truth." "You are accusing me." My voice cracked. "You're sitting there telling me you think I had sex with another man and got pregnant and passed off another man's child as yours. That's exactly what you're accusing me of." He didn't flinch. "If you have nothing to hide, then the test shouldn't be a problem." I stood there in my own kitchen, looking at the man I'd loved for nearly a decade, and felt something inside me fracture. This wasn't a conversation. This was an interrogation. He'd already convicted me in his mind. "I have never cheated on you," I said, my voice shaking. "Not once. Not ever. I haven't even thought about it. I haven't looked at another man since we started dating. I have given you everything. My trust, my body, my future, a child, and you're standing there accusing me of—" "It's just a test," he interrupted. "If you're telling the truth, then it'll prove you right. Why are you so defensive?" That question. That goddamn question. The one that makes any denial sound like proof of guilt. I was defensive because he was attacking me. I was defensive because he was accusing me of the worst betrayal imaginable with no evidence other than the shape of our son's nose. "Fine," I heard myself say. "Do it. Order the test. You'll see you're wrong. And then we're going to have a very long conversation about why you ever thought this was acceptable." He nodded, looking almost satisfied. Like he'd won something. I went to our bedroom that night and cried into my pillow so he wouldn't hear. The accusation felt like a knife sliding between my ribs. Not a quick stab, but a slow, deliberate penetration. The man I loved, the father of my child, looked at our son and saw a stranger. Looked at me and saw a liar. I had never cheated. I had never even come close. I'd turned down drinks from attractive men at conferences. I'd ignored flirtatious comments from patients. I'd built my entire life around the sanctity of our marriage, and he was treating it like a crime scene he was investigating. The worst part was the way he looked at our son after that. There was a distance now, a coldness. He stopped picking him up as much. Stopped reading to him before bed. Our 3-year-old didn't understand why Daddy suddenly seemed so far away, and I couldn't explain it to him because how do you tell a child that his father isn't sure he belongs to him? The waiting period. The DNA test was administered a week later. I watched the technician swab the inside of my son's cheek, watched my husband submit his own sample with that same cold certainty on his face, and felt nothing but exhaustion. We had to wait 10 business days for the results. 10 days of living with a man who had accused me of the unthinkable. 10 days of stilted dinners and silent mornings. 10 days of him looking at me like I was already guilty, just waiting for the evidence to catch up. He was smug during those 10 days. That's what I remember most. Not uncertain. Not apologetic. Not even particularly upset. Just smug. Confident. Like he knew something I didn't, like the test was just a formality to confirm what he'd already figured out. I started sleeping in the guest room. Not because I felt guilty, I had nothing to feel guilty about, but because I couldn't stand the feeling of lying next to someone who thought I was capable of such profound betrayal. Every time I closed my eyes in that bed, I saw his face when he'd made the accusation, that flat certainty, and my skin crawled. I threw myself into work during those 10 days. Longer hours at the clinic. More patients. Anything to stay out of that house, away from those accusing eyes. My colleagues noticed something was wrong. One of them asked if everything was okay at home, but I couldn't talk about it. How do you explain that your husband is waiting for a DNA test to prove you're a cheater? On the 9th day, I came home to find him sitting at the kitchen table again, laptop open, refreshing the results page over and over. He didn't even look up when I walked in. Should be any time now, he said. They said 10 business days at the outside. I didn't respond. I just went to the guest room and waited. Update 2. The results. The email came at 3:47 p.m. on a Thursday. I know because I was between patients and felt my phone buzz in my pocket. I didn't check it until I finished the session, a young athlete recovering from ACL surgery, but I knew what it was. I drove home early. When I walked through the door, my husband was sitting on the couch, printed results in his hand. His face was pale. Well, I said, my voice flat. I already knew what it said. I'd known all along. But I needed to hear him say it. He looked up at me with an expression I hadn't seen before. Confusion. Genuine, unfeigned confusion. It says he's mine, he said slowly. 99.99% probability. Of course it does. I sat down in the chair across from him, keeping the coffee table between us like a barrier. Because he is yours. Because I never cheated on you. Because this whole accusation was based on nothing but your own paranoia. I waited for the apology. I'd been waiting for it for 10 days. In my mind, I'd imagined this moment 100 different ways, him breaking down, admitting he'd been wrong, begging for forgiveness. I'd even practiced what I would say in return, how I would try to forgive him, how we would rebuild. But the apology didn't come. Instead, he kept staring at the paper, his brow furrowed. I don't understand, he said. I was so sure. You were wrong, I said, my voice rising. You looked at our son and decided he wasn't yours based on nothing. You accused me of cheating with no evidence. And now you know the truth. I expect an apology. He shook his head slowly. I can't figure out where I went wrong. I was certain. The timing, the way you'd been acting. Acting? How had I been acting? He looked at me then, really looked at me, and I saw something flicker behind his eyes. Something that looked almost like fear. You were distant sometimes. Secretive. You'd check your phone and not tell me who you were texting. I'm a physical therapist. I coordinate with doctors, nurses, insurance companies. I text colleagues about patient care. That's called having a job. I know that now, he said quickly. I convinced myself. And that's when it hit me. That's when the first spark of suspicion ignited in my chest. He was so certain I'd cheated. Not just suspicious, certain. The kind of certainty that doesn't come from vague suspicions about phone use or distant behavior. The kind of certainty that comes from something else entirely. Why were you so certain I cheated? I asked, and my voice was quiet now. Dangerously quiet. What made you so sure? The investigation. That question hung in the air between us, and I watched him scramble for an answer. His mouth opened and closed. His eyes darted away from mine. And in that moment I knew. I didn't know what exactly. I didn't have evidence. But something in my gut twisted, and I knew that his certainty about my infidelity hadn't come from nowhere. It had come from somewhere. From something he knew about that I didn't. He tried to distract me. Tried to pivot to how we could move forward, rebuild trust, maybe see a counselor. But I was done listening. I told him I was tired, that we'd talk tomorrow, and I went back to the guest room. That night, after he fell asleep, I began my investigation. I'm not proud of it. Going through someone's phone, their emails, their private messages, it feels like a violation, even when you have good reason. But I had good reason. He'd spent months treating me like a criminal based on nothing but paranoia. If there was something he was hiding, I had a right to know. His phone was the first thing I checked. He'd always been careful with it, I realized now. Always keeping it face down, always taking calls in another room. I'd never thought anything of it before, I trusted him, but now those behaviors took on new meaning. His password was our wedding anniversary. Of course it was. He was sentimental about dates, even if he wasn't sentimental about fidelity. The messages were there. All of them. Years and years of them, going back 7 years. Before we were married. Before we were even engaged. Her name, or rather, her contact name in his phone, was his coworker's. A woman I'd met at company holiday parties. A woman who'd smiled at me across buffet tables and told me how lucky my husband was to have me. A woman who had apparently been sleeping with him since before I even existed in his life. I sat on the floor of the guest room with his phone in my hands, reading message after message, and felt my reality reconstruct itself around me. Everything I thought I knew was wrong. Every memory was now tainted. The messages were intimate. Not just physical, emotional. They called each other pet names. They discussed their daughter, a daughter I didn't know existed. They talked about us, about me, about how he felt trapped in our marriage but couldn't leave because of our son. They talked about their future together, about how someday, when the timing was right, they'd be together for real. 7 years. Their affair had been going on for 7 years. It started before he proposed to me. It continued through our wedding, through my pregnancy, through the birth of our son, through every anniversary and holiday and quiet evening we'd spent together. While I was building a life with him, he was building another one with her. And she had a daughter. His daughter. A little girl who was now 6 years old, 3 years older than our son. I did the math, and it made me sick. When that child was conceived, we were engaged. When she was born, we were married. When she started walking, I was pregnant with our son. She had existed, this secret half-sibling, for our son's entire life. And I never knew. I kept reading. I couldn't stop. Every message was a fresh wound, but I needed to see the full picture. I needed to understand the scope of the betrayal. And then I found the message that explained everything. From 6 weeks ago, right before he started getting distant. Right before he accused me of cheating. She had told him she wanted more. She was tired of being the other woman. Her husband, because she was married too, I realized with a fresh wave of nausea, was getting suspicious, and she needed him to choose. Leave his wife or lose her. And his response. Rather than confessing, rather than coming clean, rather than facing the consequences of his own infidelity, he decided to find a way out. A justification. If he was the one who'd been wronged, if he could prove I was unfaithful, then leaving me wouldn't make him the villain. It would make him the victim. The paternity test wasn't about our son. It was never about our son. It was about creating a narrative that would let him leave me without admitting what he'd done. He was so desperate to justify his own escape that he'd convinced himself I must be cheating too. He was so certain I'd cheated because cheating was normal to him. He couldn't imagine fidelity because he'd never practiced it. I sat in the dark of the guest room until dawn, screenshots saving to my cloud, my whole body numb. Then I got up, got dressed, and drove straight to a divorce attorney. Update 3. The confrontation. I didn't confront him right away. I wanted to be strategic. I wanted to have my lawyer's advice, my evidence organized, my next steps planned. I'd spent years unknowingly being the fool in this story. I wasn't going to give him any more power now that I knew the truth. But he could tell something had changed. When I came home that day, after meeting with my lawyer, he tried to talk about rebuilding our marriage. He'd even bought flowers, the first time in years, and was making dinner. Trying to smooth things over now that his paternity scheme had backfired. I've been thinking, he said, stirring something on the stove with forced casualness. Maybe we should see a couples counselor. Work through some of these trust issues. Trust issues. The audacity of that phrase coming from his mouth made me want to laugh. Or scream. Maybe both. I think there's something else we need to discuss first, I said, pulling out my phone. I watched his face as I played the first screenshot on my screen. The color drained from his features so fast I thought he might faint. He reached for the phone, and I pulled it back. "Don't," I said, and my voice was steel. "You don't get to touch this evidence. You don't get to delete anything. It's already saved in multiple locations. My lawyer has copies." Wait, I can explain." "Can you? Can you explain 7 years of messages with your coworker? Can you explain your daughter? Can you explain how you've been planning to leave me while accusing me of infidelity?" He sat down heavily. The wooden spoon clattered to the counter. Behind him, something started to burn on the stove, but neither of us moved to turn it off. "It's not what you think," he said, and the absurdity of that phrase almost made me laugh. The defense of every cheater caught red-handed. "It's not what you think." As if I'd misinterpreted 7 years of "I love you" messages and photographs of a secret child. "It's exactly what I think," I replied. "You have been having an affair for our entire relationship. You have a daughter with another woman. And when your mistress pressured you to leave me, you decided to manufacture a reason to be the victim. You accused me of what you were doing so you could walk away clean." I wasn't." He ran his hands through his hair, looking around the kitchen like an escape route might materialize. "It's complicated. You don't understand the whole situation." "Then explain it to me." He tried. God, he tried. He talked about how the affair had started before he even met me, how he tried to end it when we got serious but couldn't, how he'd been trapped between 2 women for years. He talked about his daughter, like she was an accident he'd been dealing with, a complication rather than a person. He talked about how he loved me, really loved me, and how the affair didn't mean he didn't love me too. He talked, and the more he said, the more I understood what I'd married. Not a man who'd made a mistake. Not a man who'd succumbed to temptation once and regretted it. A man who had been living 2 lives for nearly a decade, who had deliberately and systematically betrayed me every single day, who had looked at me across the dinner table and lied to my face over and over and over again. "That's different," he said at one point, when I brought up the paternity test. "What I accused you of, that's not the same as what I did." "How is it different?" "I didn't. I never tried to pass off another child as yours. I never lied about whose baby you were carrying. No. You just created another family behind my back and let me think we were monogamous for 7 years. That's so much better." He didn't have an answer for that. I told him I wanted a divorce. I told him I'd already spoken to a lawyer. I told him he should find somewhere else to stay because I wasn't leaving my home. And then, because I'm not cruel enough to destroy someone's life without warning, I told him one more thing. "Your coworker's husband needs to know," I said. "He deserves the truth, just like I did." The fear that crossed his face then, that was satisfying. I won't pretend it wasn't. Update 4. The fallout. The divorce proceedings took 3 months. 3 months of depositions, financial disclosures, custody negotiations. 3 months of watching my husband's life dismantle piece by piece while I tried to hold mine together. I did contact her husband. Not out of spite, although I won't pretend there wasn't some satisfaction in it, but because he deserved to know. He'd been as blind as I had, apparently, living in the same delusion of a faithful marriage while his wife conducted a 7-year affair in plain sight. He called me after he found out. We talked for 2 hours. It was strange, bonding with this stranger over our shared betrayal, but there was comfort in knowing I wasn't alone. He'd had no idea about the child. His wife had told him their daughter was his. He'd never had reason to question it. Now he was ordering his own paternity test, living the nightmare I'd just escaped from. The results came back a week later. His daughter wasn't his. My husband's affair partner had been lying to her own husband for 6 years about the paternity of their child. The irony was almost poetic. My husband had accused me of doing exactly what his mistress had actually done. He'd demanded proof of a betrayal that only existed in his own mirror. The divorce was brutal but swift. My lawyer was excellent. She got me the house, the mortgage was mostly in my name anyway, and full custody of our son. My husband's infidelity was well documented, and his attempts to accuse me of cheating only made him look worse. The judge wasn't impressed by a man who demanded a paternity test from his faithful wife while hiding his own secret child. His reputation at work didn't survive either. When his coworker's husband found out, he made sure their employer knew exactly what had been going on. Having a 7-year affair with a colleague, fathering her child, and using company resources to conduct the relationship? That's a termination-worthy offense. They were both let go within the week. His affair partner left him too. That was the twist I didn't see coming. Once her husband found out, once her marriage imploded, once she lost her job, she didn't turn to my husband for comfort. She turned on him, blamed him for being careless, for not being more discreet, for somehow getting them caught. The fantasy of their future together evaporated the moment it had to exist in reality rather than in shadows. The paternity test was supposed to destroy me. Instead, it destroyed him. There's poetry in that, I guess. It doesn't make it hurt less. Update 5. Present day. So here I am, sitting in my lawyer's office, looking at 2 DNA tests, officially a divorced mother of 1. My husband, my ex-husband now, has visitation rights every other weekend and Wednesday evenings. He moved to a small apartment across town. He's working a lesser job, trying to rebuild what's left of his career. His affair partner and he aren't speaking anymore. Her husband got custody of the daughter she'd lied about for 6 years. That daughter. His daughter. My son's half-sister. I keep thinking about that little girl. His daughter. She's innocent in all this. Sometimes I wonder if my son will ever meet his half-sister. She didn't choose her parents. She didn't choose to be born into a lie. She's 6 years old, and her whole world has been shattered by adults who should have known better. I don't know what will happen to her, whether she'll stay with her mother or go to foster care or somehow end up in my ex-husband's life in a meaningful way. I don't know if I want my son to know her. I don't know if keeping them apart is protecting him or punishing her. These are the questions that keep me up at night. Not the divorce, that's just paperwork and logistics. Not my ex-husband's downfall, that was his own doing. The questions that haunt me are the ones about children who didn't ask for any of this. My son still doesn't fully understand what happened. He knows mommy and daddy don't live together anymore. He knows he spends some weekends at daddy's apartment. He doesn't know about the paternity test. He doesn't know that for a few months, his father looked at him and saw a stranger. He doesn't know he has a half-sister somewhere in this city. I'll have to tell him someday. Not now, he's too young, but eventually. He deserves to know the full truth, just like I did. And when that day comes, I'll have to explain how his father's guilt made him suspicious, how projection works, how sometimes the people who accuse you the loudest are the ones hiding the most. I'm in therapy now, twice a week, trying to process not just the betrayal but the magnitude of the deception. 7 years. Every memory I have of my marriage is colored by knowledge my husband had and I didn't. Every "I love you," every anniversary, every quiet moment of supposed intimacy. He was living another life during all of it. How do you trust again after that? How do you look at a new person and not wonder what they're hiding? My therapist says healing isn't linear. She says there will be good days and bad days. She says the goal isn't to forget but to integrate, to take this experience and let it become part of my story without letting it define me. I'm trying. Some days are easier than others. The hardest part isn't the anger. I expected the anger. The hardest part is the grief. I'm grieving a marriage that never actually existed. Grieving a version of my husband that was only ever a performance. Grieving the life I thought we were building together while he was building something else with someone else. I'm also grieving on behalf of my son. He'll grow up with divorced parents, shuffling between 2 homes, learning early that love doesn't always last. I wanted better for him. I wanted to give him the stable, 2-parent household I never had growing up. Instead, I'm giving him a lesson in resilience, which isn't nothing, but it's not what I planned. My ex-husband called last week. Not about custody or logistics, we handle that through our lawyers now, but to talk. He wanted to explain again. Wanted me to understand that he never meant for any of this to happen. I hung up. I don't need his explanations. I don't need his justifications. I've spent enough time trying to understand the mind of a man who could look at his faithful wife and accuse her of his own sins. What I need now is to build a new life without him in it. I've started running again. Something I gave up years ago when life got too busy. I run in the mornings now, before my son wakes up, through the quiet streets of our neighborhood. It helps. The physical exhaustion quiets the mental noise. For 30 or 40 minutes, I'm not a betrayed wife or a single mother or a woman whose entire marriage was a lie. I'm just a body in motion, breathing hard, alive. Sometimes, during those runs, I think about what could have been. If he'd never demanded the paternity test. If I'd never found those messages. Would I still be married to him now, still living in that beautiful lie? Would he have eventually left me anyway? Or would we have grown old together, me never knowing about his other family, him carrying his secret to the grave? I'll never know. And maybe that's okay. Maybe the truth, as painful as it was, is better than the alternative. Reflection. 3 months post-divorce, and I'm learning to rebuild. I've started telling people what happened. Not everyone, not strangers, but my close friends, my family. I kept it quiet during the divorce, too ashamed and too raw to discuss it. But silence started to feel like protection for him rather than for me. So I talk about it now. I tell the story the way I've told it here, and I watch people's faces as they realize the depth of the betrayal. It helps somehow. Externalization of trauma, my therapist calls it. My ex-husband's name has become a cautionary tale in certain circles. The co-workers who witnessed his downfall, the mutual friends who chose my side, her husband's family who heard the whole story, they all know what he did now. He lost not just his wife and his job but his community, his reputation, the social fabric of his life. Sometimes I feel guilty about that, like maybe I contributed to his destruction by exposing him. But then I remember that I didn't create this situation. I just revealed it. He did this to himself. Every choice, every lie, every secret meeting with his affair partner, those were his actions. I'm simply the person who stopped hiding them. I keep thinking about something my therapist said last week. She said that infidelity often isn't about the betrayed partner at all. It's about the cheater's internal void, their inability to be present, their addiction to validation from multiple sources. She said that he would have cheated on anyone. That it wasn't about me being inadequate, it was about him being unable to be faithful. That helps on good days. On bad days, I still wonder what I could have done differently. What signs I missed. Why I wasn't enough. But I know that's the wrong question. I was enough. I was more than enough. I was a faithful wife and a devoted mother and a woman who built her life around a partnership that only existed on one side. The problem was never me. The paternity test was supposed to destroy me. It was supposed to give him the justification he needed to walk away clean, to be the victim in a story where he was actually the villain. Instead, it destroyed him. But here's the truth no one tells you about revenge stories, about karma, about justice served. It doesn't actually make you feel better. Not in the long run. Watching his life fall apart didn't heal the wounds he inflicted. Seeing his affair partner leave him didn't undo the 7 years of lies. Winning the house and the custody didn't give me back the marriage I thought I had. What it gave me was closure. And information. And the ability to move forward without him, without the weight of his deception still hidden in my life. I'm building something new now. Something that's just mine and my son's. It's smaller than what I had before, a family of 2 instead of 3, but it's honest. It's real. There are no secrets lurking beneath the surface, no hidden children, no co-workers waiting in the shadows. I'm learning to trust again, slowly. My therapist says that's normal. She says that betrayal trauma takes time to process and that the fact that I'm even open to the idea of dating someday is a good sign. I'm not ready yet. Not even close. But the possibility exists somewhere in my future, and that's more than I thought I'd have a year ago. My son is thriving, despite everything. Kids are resilient in ways adults aren't. He's adapted to the new normal with a flexibility that amazes me. He asks about his father sometimes, and I always speak kindly, not about what happened between us, but about who his father is to him. I won't poison that relationship, no matter how much I'm tempted. My son deserves to love his father without carrying my baggage. But someday, when he's older, I'll tell him the whole truth. About the paternity test. About the affair. About his half-sister, out there somewhere, connected to him by blood and tragedy. I hope, when that day comes, he'll understand why I left. I hope he'll see that I was protecting both of us. And I hope, maybe this is naive, that he'll be a better man than his father. That he'll learn from watching my ex-husband's choices that betrayal has consequences, that lies compound, that the people you love deserve your honesty even when it's hard. For now, though, we just live. Day by day. Rebuilding something honest from the ashes of something false. And if there's a lesson in all of this, it's this: the paternity test was never about our son. It was about him. His guilt. His projection. His desperate attempt to find an exit from a lie he'd been living for 7 years. He looked at me and saw a cheater because that's all he knew how to be. I looked at him and saw my husband. I was wrong, and he was wrong, but we were wrong in very different ways. I'm not wrong anymore. I see clearly now. And I'm walking forward, into whatever comes next, with eyes wide open. The paternity test was supposed to destroy me. Instead, it set me free. Final update. I won't be posting again. Thank you all for the support. For anyone going through something similar, trust your gut. Investigate your doubts. And know that the truth, however painful, is always better than a beautiful lie. Here's what I learned from my husband's paternity test. The people who accuse the loudest are often the ones hiding the most. He was so certain I'd cheated. Not suspicious, certain. The kind of certainty that doesn't come from vague worries about phone use or distant behavior. It comes from projection. From knowing what you're capable of and assuming everyone else is the same. He couldn't imagine fidelity because he'd never practiced it. 7 years of affair. 7 years of another woman. 7 years of a secret daughter growing up in parallel to our life. And when his mistress pressured him to choose, he didn't confess. He manufactured a reason to be the victim. If he could prove I was unfaithful, leaving me wouldn't make him the villain. It would make him justified. The paternity test wasn't about our son. It was never about our son. It was about creating an escape route from a lie he'd been living since before we were married. The test proved our son was his. 99.99% probability. I expected an apology. I expected closure. Instead, I got confusion. I was so sure, he kept saying. And that's when it hit me, why was he so sure? I found 7 years of messages that night. Pet names. Plans for their future. Photographs of a daughter I never knew existed. A 6-year-old girl conceived while he was proposing to me. Born while we were married. Taking her first steps while I was pregnant with our son. Every memory I have of my marriage is a lie I didn't know I was living. The paternity test was supposed to destroy me. Instead, it destroyed him. His wife left. His affair partner left when reality got harder than the fantasy. Her husband found out their daughter wasn't his. My husband lost his job, his reputation, his community. Everything he built in shadows collapsed when the light hit it. There's poetry in that, I guess. It doesn't make it hurt less. I keep thinking about that little girl. His daughter. My son's half-sister. She's 6 years old and her whole world shattered because adults couldn't stop lying. She didn't choose her parents. She didn't ask to be born into deception. Someday I'll have to explain to my son that he has a sister out there somewhere. I don't know how to have that conversation yet. My therapist says infidelity is rarely about the betrayed partner. It's about the cheater's internal void, their inability to be present, their addiction to validation. She says he would have cheated on anyone. That it wasn't about me being inadequate. That helps on good days. On bad days, I still wonder what signs I missed. But I know that's the wrong question. I was enough. I was more than enough. I was faithful, devoted, building a life around a partnership that only existed on my side. The problem was never me. Watching his life fall apart didn't heal the wounds. Winning the house and custody didn't give me back the marriage I thought I had. What it gave me was closure. Information. The ability to move forward without his deception still hidden in my life. I'm building something new now. Something smaller, a family of 2 instead of 3, but honest. Real. No secrets lurking beneath the surface. No hidden children. No co-workers waiting in shadows. My son is thriving. Kids are resilient in ways adults aren't. I won't poison his relationship with his father, no matter how tempted I am. He deserves to love his dad without carrying my baggage. But someday, when he's older, I'll tell him the truth. And I hope he learns that betrayal has consequences. That lies compound. That the people you love deserve your honesty even when it's hard. The paternity test was supposed to destroy me. Instead, it set me free.